Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of In Conversation with Roy, a Global Leaders podcast vlog series. It's a forum in which we interact with global leaders from across the world, from different sectors and genres and domains, and bring you perspectives and insights that truly matter. And in doing so, we have the absolute pleasure of welcoming to the show today Faisal Abbas, Editor-in-Chief of Arab News. Faisal, wonderful to have you on the show. Thank you for being here.
Always a pleasure to be in conversation with you, Roy.
Thank you. Pleasure is all mine, Faisal. I would like to start off with a thought, Faisal. And probably some time back, one of the wise men said, if you don't read news, you are not informed. But if you do read news, you are misinformed. And in that dilemma is the core theme of the session, which is journalism still investigative or investigated? And what does the future of media augur in that sense of the word?
Look, I think it's a very important topic, particularly at this point of time. We are all going through a massive transformation, and not just in journalism or in media. Essentially, I always say that we are living in a unique period of human history where humanity as a whole, at no point had it had this ability to both transmit and receive information in the way that it does today. Add to that the recent developments in generative artificial intelligence. You put all of that together, and we wouldn't be exaggerating if we say we are at a turning point no different than the industrial revolutions or even the invention of the wheel.
Yeah, true. Very valid points in there, Faisal. See, times have changed. Times have been changing for a while. Do you also see journalism evolving in that sense of the word? Because I almost get a feeling as if, we're going back to the retro times. We talk about new phenomena, new coinage, like, you have solutions journalism, constructive journalism, positive journalism, which is always the case probably some decades back, when journalism was all about doing things for the society at large, for the community in particular, and so on and so forth. So is it about reinventing the wheel, really? Is it too late in the day? Do you see such things coming back into fruition of some sort?
Oh, I absolutely agree. We do need to reinvent journalism, particularly that the purpose of journalism has now changed. It is quite telling and quite interesting, actually, that the reason why we needed journalism in the past was because of too little information. Today, by contrast, we need journalism more than ever because of too much information. You do need that curator that is going to tell you what is real, what is fake, what is important and what is not, at the time and the place that is important to you as a user. And this is another distinction from what used to happen in the past, where you were tied to the publishing time or circulation time of a newspaper or a particular newscast. These are the main differences between journalism in the past and journalism today.
Very well said, Faisal. And, I can't just help but wonder and probably say it aloud that, any kind of content that is probably slightly bold, something that challenges the status quo really is questioned. And those questions remain in terms of how independent journalism could be, how the freedom of the press would be upheld, and how it would be a social catalyst for good change, right? So if you look at it in context really of the last couple of years around the globe really, right? Certain things have taken a lot of predominance for the wrong reasons. I would like to look at it like, if you look at sarcasm is in its spasm, right? If you look at satire, is almost retired, and the truthless becomes ruthless. So in all this conundrum of how things are happening, which not ought to be, how do you see journalists of the highest order would be able to take a stance and say, hey, we are the custodians of society, of positive change, and this is where we take a stance?
I will answer in two parts. I'll start with the last thing you said. Journalists need to do that. As I said in the earlier response, there couldn't be a more important time for the rise of journalism and journalists. The only difference is the tools and the reasons why we do our job, which is to be able to help with the explosion of information, including fake news and material that is circulated with a particular agenda. Now, which actually is a good segue to my next point. You were asking about censorship and governments and whether our role is to challenge. If I were to use an analogy, I would use probably a scene from the film Independence Day when there's an alien invasion. So it used to be the ever-going battle between authorities and journalism, a battle for what can you publish and what can't you publish, etc. But today, both journalists and governments are on one side against the greater evil. The greater evil is fake news, is the ability to produce fake news at a phenomenal speed, with unimaginable consequences. We're talking about deep fake technology. This is the kind of thing that can start wars. So actually, if you think about it logically, governments more than ever need professional, respectful journalism to be able to let the public know that this is fake and this is real.
True. And yes, and I think that brings into a different context as well. I mean, if you look at phenomena like breaking news, viral news, probably it can contribute a lot to the fake news that goes unchecked. In that context, really, if you look at privacy is dead, right? And social media has a smoking gun. So how do you look at combining really, what ought to be there in terms of the public domain and what ought not to be there? In saying so, there's always this conundrum of what are we impinging on the right of somebody who's going to speak his mind, and not overstepping it in so many ways that it impacts society and nation and state in an adverse manner. So how do you really draw the line in the sand by being able to balance both the spectrums?
Let's talk a bit about privacy. It is fascinating. So I lived in London about 20 years ago, and the big debate was about governments bringing ID cards. As you know, the United Kingdom does not have government-issued ID cards, and a lot of people consider it an infringement on their personal privacy. And, people feel awkward about being spied on, about sharing their personal data with others. Remarkably, since the rise of social media, somebody must be out there laughing, because people are not only sharing their personal data, like their date of birth, nationality, etc., but even their most intimate secrets willingly. So if there was a spy agency or somebody who wanted to make use of that data, we've just collectively, as humanity, we've just made it a lot easier for them. I think we've lost the battle for privacy. There are laws, there are countries, there are blocs such as the EU that are working hard to win some mileage. But I think that ship has already sailed. And we need to accept that we voluntarily allowed our privacy to be violated.
True, Faisal. And in saying that, probably, it opens up probably a can of worms, because what we have is an audience set that is very discerning, that's very evolved, very open to speak their minds. And in doing so, though, I think it becomes a big question mark for the media houses to be able to really think and ponder as to what does good content look like. And if you look at the entire spectrum of content, audience reach, monetization, access, and so on and so forth. So how do you, whilst you being a part of a very large media group, how do you kind of balance that self-balancing ecosystem of saying, hey, good content is there, we aggregate news, we inform the audience, we educate the audience. In saying so, we are probably not focusing much on views rather than aggregated news, because that's what society looks at, some shaping up opinions, being able to influence society, to be able to make up their own minds in a context that is unbridled. So your thoughts on that, Faisal?
You raise a very important question, and it's an issue that we all thought as journalists has been resolved decades ago, years ago, which is the separation from news, separation between views and news. Interestingly, you now have that argument making a comeback. And one of the best examples I can think of, even in Western countries where that argument shouldn't be there, but because of what happened with social media, the line between news and views has become blurred. And professional organizations which by profession and by mandate have to separate are suffering. One company that does it very well is a new startup called Semaphore, which actually turned it into an advantage. I mean, they say this is the news and this is the views, and you shouldn't mix them up. But it is no question that with the rise of social media and stories going viral, the line couldn't be any more blurry between what is considered news and what is considered views.
True. And having said that, do you see a phenomena where, well-intentioned media houses and journalists, in that sense of the word, would probably focus a bit more on the views segment rather than on the news, because that's what shapes society? I'll probably just give you a context to that. Lot of those media houses, a lot of the content that is kind of dished out is either a paid media or sponsored media, right? In that context, really those media houses are still not doing too well. They're running into losses, laying off people and all of that. So something somewhere is wrong, because even though you are doing everything right for the TRP ratings and to be looking at those optics, rhetoric and so on and so forth, the substance somewhere is missing. And that's why the audience at large says, hey, you know what? I can read between the lines. I can't be bluffed. I have a mind of my own. I'm not stupid, right? And I can go to so many other angles and platforms and forums where I get substance. So how do you see that realization creeping into large media houses where you say, hey, we are there to impact society. We're there to influence the young. And being able to do so, it cannot happen until we kind of play to the gallery that the audience wants.
So,
your thought on that?
So your description of the current scene is very accurate, and I think the solution, or one of the solutions, is to invest in your journalists as in their personal profiles. So what happened now is you used to only get views from the opinion pages, for example, or columnists or analysts who appear on the likes of BBC or CNN, and you would hope or assume that those channels or newspapers have already vetted and qualified those who they deem worthy of giving an opinion. What has happened now with social media is everybody has a platform. And then suddenly everybody is an expert on climate, expert on human rights, expert on sports, expert on business and politics at the same time.
Right.
It's just a matter of who says it in a more engaging, believable way, even if it's completely false. So the only solution, in my opinion, is for news brands to invest heavily, not just in their own brand, not just, for example, in Arab News or Semaphore or BBC, etc., but into their individual writers, building up their credentials so that people have a reason to follow, or what I call the RTF. So once you work on that RTF, you create a distinctive advantage for your columnist or subject matter expert to distinguish them from all the other voices around. As I said, you are just on social media, you'll be surprised that the same person today gives you an opinion on climate, tomorrow gives you an opinion on women's rights, the third day is a business and real estate expert, and people just believe it. So you need to work on the reason to follow.
Very true. Very interesting insights, really. So, in looking at the future of journalism, though, yes, it is very optimistic. There's a lot of positive change going to be there. It also calls for a lot of reflection and responsibility. So, your comments on that, Faisal? How do you see it?
I think that's the only thing that hasn't changed. I think anybody in our profession who wants to be a journalist or is a journalist is there because they feel responsible for the society or the country or the state of the world as it is. I know it's a bit idealistic to say, but there's a reason why people work the hours that we do. There's a reason why people come to the newsroom on holidays, on weekends, early morning, late night. They follow the stories whenever and wherever it happens. And that reason isn't money. Our jobs as journalists worldwide, they really don't pay that well.
True.
The reason why people do it is passion. The reason why people do it is because they care. The reason why they do it is because they believe they can make a difference. And if you don't have that, then you are in the wrong industry.
Very true, Faisal. And, I've been privy to a lot of conversations with journalists around the globe. And I think one echo chamber that comes out very loudly is that whilst we want to be independent, while we want to speak our minds, while we want to operate in a certain manner, that probably is what journalists should stand for. I'll probably give you an analogy what happens to the corporate side, right? An organization is as great as the people in it, and the people are as great as the organization lets them be. So they are stuck in that conundrum of what is constituted as safe journalism, not exactly right journalism, right? So how do you then look at that particular crop of journalism aspirants who wants to get into this field, into this craft, but they are disillusioned with the fact that, hey, I won't be able to speak my mind.
Rome wasn't built in a day. If everybody wants to give up before even trying, then we would have accomplished nothing throughout history. Look, I happen to be in Saudi Arabia in a very interesting time. Who would have thought if we were having this podcast 8 or 9 years ago and I were to tell you, look, I'm going to be the editor-in-chief of the newspaper that is going to be the first that publishes a Christmas edition or normalizes photos of Christian symbols and crosses in Saudi Arabia, wishes our Jewish brothers Shana Tova or Happy New Year, does a Valentine Day issue. You wouldn't have believed me. If I were to give up before doing all of those editions, and all of that has happened, by the way, in the last 8 years, it's very easy to play it safe, to play it by the book. But your role as an editor-in-chief, isn't just to write, isn't just to edit or just to manage. Essentially, you are there for one reason, which is your judgment. So when you look at a situation where our crown prince in Saudi Arabia visits the Archbishop of Canterbury and invites His Grace to Saudi Arabia, similarly with the Coptic Pope of Egypt, your job is the judgment. Your job is to realize that's a clear symbol where or indicator where the country is going. And this is what inspired the first ever Christmas edition in the history of Saudi Arabia. And the other thing I would say very quickly is you shouldn't do it for the applause. You should do it because it's the right thing to do.
Lovely. Great, Faisal. And I think I really admire the way that Arab News plies its trade, really, in terms of being able to take a stand, being able to declutter a lot of those conspiracy theories and very layered, twisted contours, which the public at large is not able to decipher, decode, really. And I think that is also the responsibility of a good journalist, being able to look at a worldview or probably a compelling theme, being able to dissect it in a very simpler form, and then be able to feed it back to the audience at large to say, hey, this is what it means like, and probably then you can take your own call, right? Having said that, the reality is far removed from what an ideal state should be. And whilst good journalism is good business, and there are business houses who are minting money, but I think the true essence of true journalism is also to be able to champion the narrative of the underprivileged, of those on the wrong side of advantage, probably those who don't have a voice, and being able to look at those hyper-local issues, sensitize citizenry really, instead of sanitization. And I think that's a long way to go, probably, Faisal.
It is, but every journey starts with the first step, right? So again, same argument as before. Just because it's a long way, it shouldn't be. You shouldn't be dissuaded or discouraged not to do it. And I always say, look, just because you can't reach 100%, that doesn't mean you're not happy with 80% or 85% or whatever you can achieve. It's much better than zero.
Very true, very true. And the challenges of journalism as we see it now, because journalism is evolving, the audience set is evolving, the expectations are evolving, right? A lot of it has to do with what journalism is at this point in time. A lot of distrust or mistrust really in the way that news is played out or disseminated, in the way that the freedom of the press is questioned, quarantined, and so on and so forth, right? While each country, each state will have its own ways of doing it. But having said that, for the genre really, in terms of journalism per se, where you hold a moral compass in terms of putting things in the right perspective and standing for what is right, not exactly what is lucrative, right? So it is a tough stance to take. You need to build muscle around the courage really, right? So how do you see this particular aspect of courage playing out in the future?
Look, courage is very important, but courage without professionalism would be suicide. So you could be courageous as you want, but you still need to follow the guidelines, the basic guidelines of professionalism.
Yeah.
As in, stories need to be balanced. You need to give each side their fair share of comments. You're never to make assumptions, and you always have to fact check, record conversations if they're on the record, keep them in case you go to court. So courage on its own is not a substitute for professionalism. Similarly, professionalism without courage is useless.
Very true, correct. I will probably put you in the spot now in terms of one particular $1 million question that is, affecting a lot of the media houses, trying to transition from a print background to the online, digital form. So would you really believe in your capacity that print is there to stay? And if yes, in what form and shape?
Look, it's there to stay, but not in its current function. The concept of a daily newspaper, I think, and I know it's surreal, should not be to tell news. In essence, it should be a views paper if you're going to be publishing daily. Because just think about it logically. By the time the newspaper goes to print and it's printed and circulated the next day and it arrives to your desk, whatever news you're reading would have become obsolete or old news. What you do need is a daily analysis. So essentially, you get the newspaper to read analysis about what happened, telling you what happened, why does it impact you, and how can it impact the future. That is very useful, and that's going to continue to be useful. Yes, it's there to stay, but in a different form and a different frequency. So some people might want to read their news daily. Some people might need it weekly. Some people read in the morning. Some people read it in the evening. My argument has always been on this front is that there's a Harvard Business Review article called Marketing Myopia. What has happened in our industry is a severe case of marketing myopia. By definition, marketing myopia means when you don't know what industry you're in. So the railway industry in the United States mistakenly thought they are in the business of rail, when the reality is they are in the business of transportation. So they should have read the trends and invested their money in planes, cars, whatever, Hyperloop, whatever technology is. Yeah. The problem in our industry is because of this severe case of marketing myopia, people, decision makers, thought that our business is paper or our business is television, when our business is content or business is news. Correct. When you think in that way, you realize that as long as you have compelling content, as long as you have an RTF, a reason to follow, people will always find a way to read you or follow you, be it in print, be it online, be it on the radio, be it on television, be it in the virtual world, artificial intelligence, you name it. As long as you have that reason to follow.
Brilliant insights, Faisal. See, there's a very interesting parallel that's happening in the world today. And probably this goes back to probably 3 years back, when New York Times, a good friend of mine, Achilles Saltis, he's a senior vice president of New York Times. He was then taken to probably, co-host or co-found a particular democracy and culture and art foundation, which became an annual event, and in which a lot of, lobbyists or a lot of citizenry, a lot of positive activists and all of that, they came into a common forum, and it is happening every year really, where there's a lot of, exchange of insights and discussion for planet Earth, really, similar to probably what happens in the World Economic Forum in Davos, probably a parallel to what really happens. And do you see an emergence of similar parallel forums, which then challenges probably what conventional media houses ought to propagate so far?
Look, one of the most convincing business models is what I like to call the economist business model, where they think of their readers as a tribe, right? So this tribe of intellectual, curious people who are willing to pay to get a competitive advantage in terms of knowledge.
Right.
How could we serve them? So you have the physical magazine, you have the Economist events, right? And a few other products, podcasts, etc.
Yeah.
That creates an ecosystem for you as an intelligent, curious person to be able to benefit. I think that is a business model that works, and the proof is in the pudding. So, there's a reason why The Economist is still doing well. Others have failed, but they still do well because they've mastered that form of thinking.
So probably that's something that's there to stay. You see probably a resurgence of similar kind of forums in the future, which probably will coexist parallelly with the conventional media houses.
Absolutely, yes.
When the future is here, we can't stop but wonder and ponder about the lucrativeness of AI, right? I just remember speaking at a HR conference probably a couple of years back when the theme was the metaverse is the future of HR, right? And there I tried to argue the fact that, whilst there's AR, augmented reality, there's VR, virtual reality. We are the people who is the reality now. So there's still a bit of catching up to do. How do you see the influence of AI in journalism though?
Look, one thing we need to realize, which it's a mistake we all commonly make, which is in the future, so-and-so is going to happen. The reality is we are in the future now. People talk about how AI will impact us in a few years' time. AI is not waiting for us. It's impacting us now.
Correct.
I'll give you an example that I just recently found out. There are real experiments that have been successful in the healthcare industry, for example, in Saudi Arabia, where they've deployed AI and they managed to give preventive treatment by identifying people who are prone to heart attacks early on. They've managed to discover cancer at level 1, which meant that the person who received the treatment is now healthy and cancer-free. Versus not using AI and waiting a few years from now, and then it would be too late or too risky to do it. So we need to understand well that the future is happening now. AI has already started impacting our lives, and our challenge, especially in our industry, is to run as quickly as we can to see how can we deploy this to the benefit of our industry and our readers.
Lovely. Do you see a scenario, Faisal, where in the studios of Arab News, you'll probably have virtual reality set, metaverse. You are able to explain scenarios, ideas, context, runaway, let's say the presidential elections of the US happening in terms of different artificial avatars. Do you see that scenario catching up on the media house?
Absolutely. I mean, that part I can tell you sooner rather than later, and that will be the very least of the applications of artificial intelligence. This is like the amateur stuff.
Right.
You're looking now to deep analysis, historical background, ability to take the reader or the follower to the actual story and recreate an environment of which happened, be it in Gaza, be it in Ukraine. That is where we're headed. And those tools are pretty soon going to be available for everybody if they have not been developed yet.
Brilliant. See, in the case of future of work, right? The future of work, the future skills, the future jobs, really. I think there's one interesting precedent that is coming in, and that's not very far away. We are looking at probably a job of a human machine interface manager, which then takes in the feedback or the inputs from the humans at large and being able to communicate it back to the supercomputers of the AI, and being able to have that particular conduit in terms of being able to strike a balance between what is required and what they can kind of conjure. So that's the future of work, really. So do you think that future is something that's going to be existential probably in the next couple of years?
Absolutely. I think that person you described will be the most important person in the company or in the organization, because you need to balance the need of your workforce or your audience or your customers with what AI can enable you to do. And that requires constant monitoring, constant updating, because, you know, technology is not static. It used to change every 5 or 6 years. Now it's changing every 5 or 6 months, and pretty soon it will change every 5 or 6 days.
Correct.
It's you know, we've opened a Pandora box as humanity, and you know, we can either be scared or excited. I choose to be excited about what's coming next.
Brilliant, Faisal. Great. Since you are such a loved social media influencer, your thoughts and opinions are really followed. And so there's a certain gathering who would like to know a bit more about Faisal as a person beyond what he stands for, right? So probably there's a lighter segment of the show, which we'll probably delve into your personal side. So your best holiday destination?
Given my job, or one of the perks of my job is I was very lucky to travel the world and see different places. There's a few countries that I haven't visited and I would love to visit. But that also makes you a bit sensitive or bored of places that all look the same. So I tend to avoid areas that, or countries that there's a Starbucks or a McDonald's in every corner, because you could see that, for example, in the United States or for other countries. You want to experience the authentic taste, look and feel of countries,
the local nuance.
So you asked me where I'd love to go on holiday. It wasn't the case a few years ago until we've opened up and reformed and created the infrastructure, but I would recommend Saudi Arabia, particularly places like Al-Ula and the Red Sea, and Dar'iyah. So Dar'iyah is the ancient capital of the first Saudi state. It is remarkable in its beauty and history and heritage. The same can be applied for Al-Ula, where you have an ancient civilization that created these monuments, and it's breathtaking. And of course the Red Sea, because it's pristine. You have an amazing coral life there, and it's incredibly beautiful if you are to go diving or snorkeling, etc. Apart from that, I do like Italy and Japan for the same reasons. They have very unique cultures. They have their own cuisine, they have their own flavors, and you do feel disconnected from the super globalized world when you go there, because there's an incredible respect for local tradition, and you feel the difference when you're there.
Lovely. And any particular thought, any particular saying that has stuck with you all these years, being wow, that's something?
Steve Jobs once said, "Stay hungry, stay foolish." Which I think is very important, because the moment you rest on your laurels, you stop innovating and stop thinking out of the box. So stay hungry, stay foolish is very important. The other thing is, what Steve Jobs also says is that people really don't know what they want. You have to show them. So if you believe in a product, or if you believe something is going to work, you need to go all the way and try to convince people, not just give people what they want, because that is boring. So you need to constantly have that drive and fire to innovate. So in terms of quotes, I really like Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs. Probably if I may share mine, I love Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft. He said for all the CXO hires, I'm looking at two primary things. One is, does he or she create clarity? And B, does he or she create the right kind of energy? And I think that stays true and very short, succinct, but very powerful in terms of what it conveys, isn't it?
I'm gonna add that to my favorite quotes list. Thank you for sharing that, and I absolutely agree. And I think, without having heard that quote, but that is also one of the things that we do when we interview. You do need somebody who you understand and understands you, but also not somebody who's going to drag the organization or the team down, but somebody who's going to bring energy and push us all forward and get us excited.
Absolutely, Faisal. See, you're very inspiring. Who have you been inspired by? Who's your idol in life?
As a career journalist, again, to use local examples, I've been very lucky to have met my idols, and one I've become friends with and one I've worked with. So I'm talking about the two gurus of international Saudi journalism. We have a lot of very well-respected journalists, but what I do is international Saudi journalism, and I would have to say it's the former editor-in-chief of Al-Sharq Al-Awsat, Uthman Al-Umair, who I became friends with, and the former editor-in-chief of Al-Sharq Al-Awsat and general manager of Al-Arabiya, Abdurrahman Al-Rashid, who I had the pleasure of working with for nearly 10 years. And a lot of what I've learned from him.
Brilliant, Faisal. I'm not too sure if you're a foodie, but if it has to be one particular go-to food, what would that be for you?
So I think I gave you a very good indicator when I said two of my favorite countries to visit are Japan and Italy. That is also because of the unique cuisine that they have. Italy and Japan both, depending on which area you go, the cuisine will differ quite significantly. I urge people not to go for the commercial options. In reality, there's nothing called a California roll in Japan. There's plenty of types of sushi and sashimi, shabu shabu, katsu, you name it. And there are also beautiful traditions when enjoying Japanese tea or the cuisine. Italy, again, differs whether you're in the north or the south, whether you're by the sea or not. So the cuisine could be fish or meat depending where you are, the hundreds of types of pasta that they make. And most importantly, in both these countries, they respect the time that you dedicate for food. There are traditions, and you are there to enjoy a whole meal, not rush through it.
Brilliant, Faisal. If there's one thing about you that the world does not know yet, in terms of passion or certain other creativity that you have, would you mind sharing?
I am colorblind. I don't think many people know that. I discovered I was colorblind when I was very young, in kindergarten actually, because I couldn't pick up the right crayon when the teacher was asking us to pick up the brown or the red crayon. I don't think it's particularly interesting, but it's always a conversation starter because I don't think people know that I'm colorblind or know many colorblind people. So you end up always having a discussion. It's like, oh, what do you see this or what do you see that? And how does it impact your life? And in reality, it has impacted my life very positively because it made me ask questions. It made me double check, especially if you're a journalist. Essentially, what I tell people is, even if it looks red or brown to you, ask another source. So it actually fits into the job that I do because I don't see clearly. And there's a lesson in that, which is just because it looks like something to you, you should always think about how it looks like to another person.
Lovely. Great. And probably I would see it in a slightly different light because you cannot differentiate on color, which also means that you don't differentiate on color, creed, and race, which means you are agnostic to probably true talent or true news or true stance, right? I think that's one way of looking at it.
Oh, absolutely. That has also been shaped by the fact that nearly all my life I've lived in a different country for an average of every 4 or 5 years. I love and appreciate everything that I've learned in every country that I've lived in, be it Saudi Arabia, be it in Dubai, Jordan, Lebanon, the United Kingdom. I also would love to take an opportunity to say how much I respect and feel lucky to work with the team that I have working with me in Arab News, from the Saudis to the Pakistanis and Indians and the British and the Americans and the Canadians and the Jordanians and the Egyptians and all the nationalities that work with us, whether they were male or female, young or old. They all add a tremendous impact on our overall operation. And most importantly, I learn something new from them every day.
Brilliant. See, as a concluding segment of it, I mean, there's a very large audience set probably who would be kind of hearing you speak. And so what would be your parting shot or some bit of, let's say, critical takeaways, A, to the CEOs of large media organizations, B, to the editor-in-chiefs, your colleagues, similar colleagues in that particular field, and 3, let's say, a very young aspirant journalist who wants to probably, further up.
So CEOs,
editor-in-chiefs of similar media houses, and 3, somebody young who is wanting to make a career in journalism.
All right, let me start in reverse. Somebody young who wants to to have a career in journalism, I would say what Steve Jobs says is stay hungry, stay foolish. But I would add something particularly to the new generation. And, I'm not from one of those who always like to patronize the younger people, but please be patient. Again, Rome was not built in a day. And yes, we all want to be at top of the mountain, but you do have to climb it. And unfortunately, there's no fast track. So you're going to have to climb it one rock at a time. So have the patience. Don't get bored easily. Have persistence. That's the most important thing. And I say this with a lot of care and respect because I believe younger people today are an advantage to where I was or the generation before me, because they have literally the world at their fingertips. What I think people need is the patience to get there. For editors, I say learn from the young people that you have with you in the newsroom, because they are more in tune and they're more in touch with modern technology and with modern society than we are. And empower them, trust them, teach them, and learn from them.
Correct.
For CEOs, I would say, thank you for all the support and trust. And, the moment there's no support and trust, we should part ways, because there is nobody that could work without a good publisher or a good CEO. Even journalists from the Washington Post will tell you, I'm talking about the Bradleys, etc. They would tell you if it wasn't for Katharine Graham, they wouldn't have been able to do Watergate. Having an understanding, listening, and supportive CEO or publisher is very important for the success of any newspaper and any editor-in-chief, and vice versa.
Wonderful, Faisal. As articulate as ever. Amazing insights, really, for the audience sets. I'll probably leave it with a particular thought that came in from a gentleman called Sean Higgins. He says, every day the clock resets. Your winning doesn't matter. Your failures don't matter. Don't stress on what has been. Fight for what can be. Your thoughts?
I wish somebody taught me that a long time ago. Unfortunately, we spend a lot of time crying over spilled milk. And the reality is, whatever you do, you're not going to bring it back into the bottle. So I guess what you're saying is we should learn to move on, make the best of a bad situation, and keep the faith. And that is something that I need to remind myself of on a daily basis as well. So thank you for that insight.
Wonderful, Faisal. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
As usual, very, very enigmatic, insightful, and I think for the audience at large, there's a lot to chew about and ponder and reflect, and I'm sure if they've taken half of what you've said, I think they'll be a better version of themselves. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a wrap of this episode. As usual, Faisal Abbas, very enigmatic, very articulate, and very inspiring in his own right. Till the next episode, this is your host, Roy, signing off. Take care, keep shining. God bless.